place to place. Good morning, good morning, morning.
Good morning, viewers, and welcome back to the Tobago Updates morning show. On with us this morning in this first segment, we have Dr. Bishnu Ragoonauth joining us as we speak local government elections, which took place yesterday in Trinidad. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
All right, excellent. As we get the conversation started, the first area I wanted to touch on, were you at all surprised by what was the eventual outcome from the standpoint of winning corporations? And we're starting on a larger scale first with the 7-7, similar to that of the 2019 result when the last local government elections would have been held?
Absolutely not. This was expected. The 7-7 was expected. It was a push for the UNC to say that they were going to take the San Fernando Corporation, but beyond that, um, they knew full well that they had seven municipalities in the bag, and the PNM, on the other hand, um, did not seem to have been able to excite the population, so it could not have changed anything more than what it was.
All right. We see that there are indications by the political leader of the United National Congress indicating that they would have won the popular vote in the context of numbers. From where you sit, what would you see? Is that a signal being sent by the population, or at the end of the day, in the words of the Prime Minister, a win is a win? You know, whether it is by 1 vote, it is by 10 votes, 100, at the end of the day, a win is a win. Your thoughts?
A win is a win in politics. Bear that in mind. However, in this election, there were no winners, as far as I'm concerned. And I say that for the mere fact that, regardless of the fact that the UNC would have increased its number of electoral districts that it won in the election, I think they up to about 70 now, or if not 71, as opposed to the PNM one having 71, having 71. Okay. But what it meant for the UNC is simply that they have increased their numbers from 67 in the last election to 70. Let's leave it at 70. Bearing in mind that there were two additional seats this time around, so they got 67 out of they got 70 out of 141. The PNM had lost. PNM had 72 in the last election. They are down to probably 71, so that's a loss for them. And more importantly, however, when I say that there were no real winners in this election, the electorate that turned out to vote yesterday was dismally low. And if that is an indication of our democracy, it means that all our political parties, and I'm not saying only the PNM and the UNC, but all the other political parties, the PDP, the NTA, the PEP, whoever else have you, none of them could have excited significant numbers of people to go out there and vote. And that, I think, is the loss for the country in terms of democracy. Mind you, there's that whole question: why do people not want to vote in a local government election? Well, there are many reasons for that, um, amongst which would be the fact that they're not really involved in participating in the process beyond the election day. They are normally left out. Local government is not delivering. But like I said, critically, the parties could not excite the people to go out there and vote.
Tobago for the element of other parties, outside of what would be our two main political parties, the UNC and the PNM. We saw a number of others, and you just referenced in terms of the PDP, Gary Griffith and other entities putting forward themselves. But as you would have put it, not being able to really excite the voter to come out and really exercise the vote to the extent that they would have been able to at least win a seat, even if not a corporation. Is there room in Trinidad and Tobago for a third party?
Based on what we saw yesterday, I would say no. The third parties are not really going to break any ground in trying to break into the political system. What we saw, however, is that we saw that there were alliances developed, and I must say that the alliances that we saw developing in this election could probably take us into the general election. But as to whether or not the third party will make a significant impact, not if they are going at the rate at which they're going. I mean, the numbers for the third parties, I don't think any third party got, I mean, probably the NTA would have gotten over 1,000 votes, probably. But that was simply because the NTA was in an alliance with the UNC and they would have gotten the UNC votes. But beyond the NTA being in that alliance with the UNC, third parties have not made any inroads into the politics of Trinidad. Of
Uh,
Trinidad.
Dr. Bishnu Ragoonauth, both parties would have campaigned. Some indicated the focus for the United National Congress would have been on general issues, general election issues. Would you say that was a strategy, seeing that they might naturally be propelling and focused on 2025 at this point, because we are almost at the end of 2023 and heading on into that campaign mode?
Definitely, the UNC did what they had to do in terms of strategy. They called this election to raise the issues that are affecting the citizenry, knowing full well that, again, the citizenry um, would probably respond more to national issues rather than to local issues. One of the things we saw on the in this election campaign was that not much emphasis was given to the local government candidates themselves on all the platforms. Who were doing the major speaking? It was the national leaders. And I mean, once you start talking about national leaders doing the campaigning, then it's not local issues. The PNM recognizing the challenge that the uphill challenge they face, attempted to talk about local government reform. I, however, know, and for those of us who were able to follow what was going on, what the PNM did in terms of the focusing on the local government reform was trying to take from the population, or trying to give the population false hope that reform is coming. Reform was not going to be coming and is not going to be coming to the extent that people were led to believe. So let me give you a simple example. In the PNM has always said, or has been saying, that we're going to make local government that similar to the THA in Tobago. In other words, councillors would now become members of an executive council. But when this election was called, there was no inclination or no direction from the PNM, from the government, not the PNM, from the government per se, that councillors, when they are getting nominated, will become uh, full-time councillors. And to that extent, you cannot simply hire somebody on a part-time basis and expect them that a year or 2 years later you'll tell them they're full-time. It doesn't work that way in elections. And to that extent, what it meant is, if we were to go to those executive councils in the same way you have the executive in the THA, you would have to call another election. In Trinidad and in the 1996, when we were going into the THA reform, the amended THA 1996, Act 40 of 1996, what the government did in Trinidad, the central government did, was to say that we are going into an election, and on the morning of the election in 1996, they proclaimed the legislation which would have given executive authority to the Executive Council of the THA. That was not done in this election. So those of us who know better would have said, don't expect that happening in Trinidad during this term. So yes, there would be incremental suggestions at reform. For instance, we may have uh, management changes and so forth. But as to whether we'll get to that stage of reform that the PNM told us that they were given, no, it's not going to happen.
So you see very much the same kind of issues will be plaguing us, or is any, are you hopeful any at all that within this term of office for local government, that going into the 2025 general election, that there will be some focus on local government reform by the current PNM administration?
There may be managerial changes in the councils, but that is at an administrative level. It is not going to be political. So in that context, and yes, they're going to tell the local government councils that local government councils that we're going to collect some of the property tax and you'll have that money. But again, that was another, well, ingenious disingenuous way to tell local government we're giving you money, but we're not giving them any extra money, because what they're going to get from property taxes are going to be deducted from the uh, grants that are normally given in every budgetary allocation. So it's just simply that you're getting it from a different source. You don't have to wait for central government, but you're not getting any extra money. So again, those were some of the concerns that, for those people who looked on, would have said what the PNM was selling to the country as reform is not really reform.
All right. Thank you very much there, Dr. Bishnu Ragoonauth, sharing his perspective on the local government elections, which just concluded yesterday. 7 corporations to the United National Congress and 7 corporations to the People's National Movement. Basically, the results remaining the same. And in the words of Dr. Bishnu Ragoonauth, no one really won, because everything remained the same in terms of the status quo for the corporations that are still controlled by the UNC and still controlled by the People's National Movement. Thank you very much for joining us here this morning on the Tobago Updates morning show to give us that perspective in relation to local government elections. Viewers, at this point, we're preparing to head on into our next interview, where we'll be speaking on the topic of farmers' public consultation, speaking with representatives from the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources and Forestry. So we remind you that this is your opportunity to share the live, share the live, share the live.